Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and it's finally time. The video I've been promising for probably over a week now. The ancestry changes in the remaster, as well as I'll be talking about the new Nephilim heritage and the new rules around mixed ancestry. So it's a very big, impactful video. And Archive of Nethys is still not out, so it's still not too late to do this video. So here we are. I'm going to do it. Now, I'm going to state here at the beginning, so you all know, this is only a video about the changes to the ancestries, as well as the versatile heritages that were found in the core book and, I guess, advanced player's guide. But there's a catch. Not everything in the advanced player's guide showed up in this book, but I will be mentioning it anyway because I don't know if Player Core 2 is going to be having some of the content I'm going to discuss here today. In addition, if it's not found in core book or the advanced player's guide, the changes, this is not a video about any other books. So please resist commenting what happened to this not core or ancestry book feature. That's not what this video is about. I don't know what they're going to be adding, and I see all the time in these videos. Remember, this is only about what's in the core book and advanced player's guide, kind of. So anything published outside of those two books are not included here in this video, and I don't know what the changes may or may not be. Errata is still kind of coming out for some of the other stuff, obviously, but we're still we are probably not going to get all the information until Player Core 2 comes out next July. So that being the case, yeah. I'll also state, even though it's kind of irrelevant at this point, but Paizo did provide for me both the Player Core and the GM's Core, but this is not a sponsored video. So all thoughts and opinions here are my own. So let's go ahead and get started with the list of changes. First, the Death Warden Dwarf got a bit of a change. Now there's no longer necromancy in the game, obviously, so now their effect applies to any effect with the void traits or any effect from any undead, which I think overall makes the Death Warden Dwarf. That's a pretty big buff. Anything from undead in general is pretty solid. And even though obviously necromancy spells had more than just negative damage, now void damage in their features, I think this is just a little bit better spread out for the Death Warden Dwarf. So I'm going to call this in general a buff. So first, we're going to get to the first set of a remastered feats line, the lore feats. So most ancestries in the core book, beside human, had a, ancestral lore feat. In this case, we're going to talk about dwarven lore. Oh, let me move my camera. So dwarven lore, and all other lore feats. And sorry if it looks a little bit weird. It's a little spaced strangely on the page. Yeah, there's no way I'm going to be able to fix this. So it's going to look a little weird. You know what? Actually, let me bring up elven lore because it's the same thing. So all the ancestry lore feats changed. They now, rather than just giving you proficiency in the lore related to the ancestry you're looking at, now they give you the additional lore general feat. Now, the benefit of the additional lore general feat that gives you this lore is the lore feat will automatically heighten as you level up at each increment in which it normally can level up. So at 3rd level, you'll get expert. At 7th level, it'll become master. And at level 15, it will become legendary. So this is actually a pretty big buff for most of the lore feats, as relevant as it is, as particular ancestry lores may or may not be relevant to your adventure. Still, it's really cool that now, rather than just getting a proficiency in your ancestry, we're now going to be getting the additional lore feat, which is going to give you essentially a legendary proficiency when you hit level 15, which is really cool. Another one of these kind of lines of feats are the weapon familiarity feats. Now, this one I love and hate at the same time. So most of the weapon familiarity traits or feats are the same, but they come with this additional little caveat you can see here on the dwarven weapon familiarity. At 5th level, you get the critical hit, or you get the critical specialization effect with the weapons provided to you by this feat. So this is actually really good, and it removes the whatever it was. Dwarves had dwarven weapon cunning. Elves had elegant weapon elegance or whatever. Gnomes had an innovator, that kind of stuff. Those feats no longer exist. Now we just have the singular feat that gives us the critical specialization when you hit level 5. This is actually really good, as a lot of classes out there don't actually get access to critical specialization or need to meet some prerequisites. So that gives this particular feat even more value than it already had. But there is a caveat. The expertise, the like dwarven weapon expertise or whatever ancestry, is no longer here in the book. And I, unlike some of the other feats I will be mentioning here soon about other feats that aren't in this book, this one I think they just straight up removed, which is very strange because the purpose of the expertise feats was to give proficiency mostly to characters who don't have martial proficiency standardly. So the dwarven weapon familiarity you can see here, it gives you essentially access to all dwarven uncommon weapons, but it also makes any of the aforementioned weapons plus the axe, pick, or warhammer, they were considered simple weapons. They got their proficiency kind of dropped for the sake of proficiency, right? And if there's any advanced weapons, which there is a lot of advanced dwarf weapons actually, they got made down to martial. Now, I think this was done for one of two reasons. One, I think this is kind of like a nerf to fighter in a way, where fighters with the expertise feat that you could select at level 13 we're able to get additional legendary proficiencies earlier than intended. And for probably a fair number of weapons, I mean, even here with Dwarf, I mean, it would be an additional, 3 weapon groups on top of the Dwarven weapons, which is pretty strong in all things considered. But, I mean, strong in the sense of giving variety, not strong in the sense of it would actually make the fighter do more damage, really. And in fact, if the fighter really wanted to, they could just do it through their own set of feats. So that being the case, that might be the reason why it was removed. But if you're playing like an alchemist, for instance, who doesn't get any martial weapon proficiencies besides alchemical bombs, well, now getting expert in an advanced weapon, like the Dwarven War Axe, for instance, is significantly harder because this feat wouldn't actually allow an alchemist to get access to the Dwarven War. Well, access, yes. Proficiency, no, because they're not trained in, axes of martial proficiency, which the Dwarven War Axe would be dropped to. So you would need to select another feat to essentially make that martial proficiency turn to expert. You actually even need to get trained in martial weapons in the first place. So one of the benefits of the expertise was that if, for instance, I used the weapon proficiency feat, which gave me access to all martial weapons, well, boom, there we go. My alchemist is now trained in the dwarven war axe, but I couldn't get to expert when the alchemist normally does because it's a martial weapon and the alchemist doesn't improve martial weapons. So I could take the level 13 feats to then get expertise in it. But now I can't do that. And the only way to really do that is to multi-class archetype into something like fighter so that I can eventually get that expert proficiency in martial weapons, which is pretty rough in all things considered. So I don't know, maybe Alchemist is just going to get martial weapon proficiency and this will be good. But for casters who wanted to do something similar, it's still going to be difficult. So I don't know why the general weapon expertise feats are gone. And if people are going to say, well, maybe I'll show up in core too. Maybe, I don't know. But it would make no sense considering that the weapon familiarity is here. Maybe they're planning on reworking it. I really don't know. Maybe y'all in the comments can let me know generally speaking. Maybe I'm missing something here. I'm not sure. But as far as the remaster is concerned, the weapon expertise feats are gone. And hey, actually, while you're down in the comments writing about why I'm wrong about something in this video, leave the video a like so someone else can complain about the video. Or maybe even subscribe so that you can see other content that you can comment on what I'm doing wrong. Or write if you're doing things positively. I don't know. I've been getting a lot of negative comments lately on a lot of my content, so maybe I'm just a little jaded. If you want to support the channel, I also would appreciate your subscription as well. But let's go ahead and continue on with the rest of the changes. So the Vengeful Hatred feats got changed to Mountain Strategy. Maybe it just sounds less vindictive. I don't know. Maybe it gave the wrong impression. Regardless, the feat is mostly the same, except now we have the Hiringar, which is maybe the new name for. It used to be Drow. We don't have Drow anymore. So either Hiringar is a version of Drow, or we're getting a whole new, different, like, type of creature or ancestry or whatever that the dwarves are particularly good at fighting at. But otherwise, the feat has remained mostly the same. Stone Cunning got changed to Stonemason's Eye, mostly because I believe Stone Cunning is a D&D thing, so the name change makes sense. But they also just reworked it. It now combines some of the features of the other feats that got technically removed as well. Eye for Treasure, and now we have Stonemason's Eye. So Stonemason's Eye, what it does is you become trained in crafting or another trained proficiency if you're already trained in crafting. You also gain the specialty crafting skill feat for stonemasonry, and as well you gain a +2 circumstance bonus on perception checks to notice unusual stonework. And as similar to stone cunning before, you can also detect even legendary proficiency like stone traps, whatever, with this feat. So overall, this is kind of a good amalgamate of a couple feats brought together and made just one really good feat. So another really solid buff for dwarves overall with the Stonemason's Eye. All right, dwarves got a new feat, probably due to some other feats being combined together. So now we have March the Mines, a really cool one. It's a 2-action 15 speed burrow, more or less. So it's really cool, and in addition, you can bring an ally with you while you're burrowing, but it's only one willing ally, and they have to be adjacent to you, and they end next to you. Now, this is a whole lot, and not necessarily a feat I would say would be good in combat, unless burrowing might get you past a wall or barrier, and this is just the faster way. I mean, it's 2 actions to burrow 15 feet. That's a pretty hefty action load, honestly. And at level 13, there might be better ways of getting burrowing, honestly. But I can see this being useful, so I'm not going to completely discount it. I think it's a really cool feat, and it really gets into the nature of dwarves of that they're really good tunnelers, which is something that really doesn't actually get hit on a lot. A lot of the time, it's like, oh, they know crafting or stone or whatever, but not their burrow speed. So I actually really like this one. So March the Mines gets a big thumbs up for me. I think it's a really cool feat. Dwarves also got another new feat. This one is Stonewall, and it's a reaction you can use once per day when an enemy or hazardous effect hits you or you fail a fortitude saving throw against it. Now, you just become you petrify yourself to essentially ignore the effect. So what it says is you become petrified until the end of your current turn. You don't take any damage from the triggering effect or any ill effects that couldn't affect stone. So a very interesting reaction, though it comes at the cost of not only a reaction, but you're petrified until the end. Oh, it's of the current turn. So it's actually not until your next turn. So actually, that's not too bad. A really easy way to just, boom, turn to stone. I think for a level 17 feet, this is pretty good. It's a once per day thing, but a once per day just kind of ignore something, especially damage or something, I think is really, really good. And this is something I learned from doing this video. I really don't like how ancestries are done in Pathfinder in general. I love the ancestries, I love their feats and how they work, but how they're balanced and all kinds of things is all over the place. And like even in the remaster here, all the ancestries do not necessarily share the same number of feats. Some ancestries will have 16 feats, for instance, and others could have 19, being a 3 feat difference. And some ancestries just don't have a lot of really good feats, while some, like the dwarf, who's been getting a lot of love lately in Pathfinder, have a lot of really good feats. Elf, for instance, I feel are very underwhelming as far as their feats, and we're going to actually talk about elves here in a moment. But before we do, I'm going to make mention of a list of feats that were in the Advanced Player's Guide that did not make it into this book. Now, I'm mentioning this because I don't know if they're going to show up in Player Core 2. So, unless they do, then these will be out of print, which means they're gone, essentially. They probably will show up in Player Core 2, but the thing is that a lot of these, like a lot of the Advanced Player's Guide feats actually still made it into the remaster. So the feats that didn't make it were Returning Throw and Sheltering Slab. Sheltering Slab made a lot of sense, and I don't know why it would be removed. Returning Throw maybe being a very general weapon. I'm not even going to speculate, honestly. We're going to wait until Player Core 2 before I make any definitive guesses as to why they are or are not there. We might see more, who knows. But these two were some of the feats that would have been in the Advanced Player's Guide that did not make it in, while others did. And it might have been a space thing. That's kind of what I'm thinking, but who knows. In the end, this is what we got. But let's go ahead and move on to Elf. So as far as the elf heritages, the Whisper Elf got pretty much a complete rework. No one really used the burst cone scent, like detect creature thing in the game. So I think this change makes a lot of sense. Now a Whisper Elf gets a +2 circumstance bonus when using the seek action to find a hidden or undetected creature within 30 feet. And when you target an opponent that is concealed or hidden from you, you reduce the flat check to 3 for concealed or 9 for hidden. This benefit doesn't apply if you can't hear the creature or the creature is incapable of making sound, for instance, a creature that is silenced. Overall, this works a lot better than how Whisper Elf used to work before. Just in general, it feels better, and I feel like it stays more in line with how a lot of other ancestries work. So I think this is a pretty big improvement for the Whisper Elf. Other than that, Elf didn't get any new feats. None of their feats really changed. Besides the standards, as I mentioned before, the Elven lore and Elven weapon familiarity feats changed like all they did for all the other ones. But yeah, they stayed mostly the same. But now they, not only having less feats in the remaster than Dwarf, are missing more from the Advanced Player's Guide. So the feats that aren't here that were in the Advanced Player's Guide were Ancestral Linguistics, Elven Aloofness, Know Your Own, and Avenge Ally. So another list, again, it's probably a space issue. I think most of the ancestries took about 3 to 4 pages, and Elf is no less than the other ones, just being, having a bit of a wordiness to some of their feats. So that being the case, I'm assuming we're going to be seeing some of these in the Player Core 2, and they were downsized for fitting into the book purposes. But I don't know. It's just something I mentioned. So here's the list. I don't know what's going to happen with these feats until Player Core 2 at least comes out. All right, so getting into Gnome, no heritage changes, but we did get some feat changes. So Burrow Elocutionist, that's a hard word, got changed to Animal Elocutionist. And more or less, it's just a buff because now the whole premise of the feat, which is you could communicate with animals at a burrow speed, now just works with all animals, wild animals. And you get a +1 circumstance bonus to make an impression on animals. So overall, this just works out as a straight buff for the gnome here. But otherwise, a pretty unremarkable feat, in my opinion. Not a change, but something that I think just made it more clear. Fey Fellowship used to have an additional section that mentioned that if you had Glad Hand, you wouldn't take the -5 status penalty to the check to immediately make an impression on a Fey, given it's a social situation. Glad Hand just automatically lets you do that in like any social situation, whether they're Fey or not. So it didn't really need to be stated, But because it's missing from the feat here as like a special mention, I figured some people would kind of get confused by this and be like, well, does Glad Hand not give it the benefit before? No, Glad Hand still does. If anything, when you get Glad Hands, it almost removes the purpose of this feat. The only benefit being still, you get a +2 circumstance bonus to perception checks and saving throws against Fae in general. So, that benefit still stays, but the immediate impression thing, Glad Hand just does it, but better than this feat. So I can't say it's any like I can't say this is a bad feat still, because Fae are very tricky, and getting a bonus to perception checks and saving throws I think is really good. Fae have lots of really nasty effects, but the immediate impression thing, if you're already going to select Glad Hand, is kind of just a, a non-issue, really, because it's either you get this benefit so you can do it right away, or you pick up Glad Hand, and then the secondary part of this feat just doesn't do anything for you regardless. So I just figured I'd mention this. It's not actually a change, but because it's laid out here in a different fashion, I figured I'd make mention of it. Another buff for Gnome here, Instinctive Obfuscation, actually got a buff. Now, no longer once per day, it's once per hour, which is a pretty good benefit. And overall, they made it make a lot more sense. Now, rather than using the effects of mirror image and needing to roll a d6 to determine whether they hit your illusion or not, the enemy just needs to make a DC 10 flat check when the effect procs. And when they succeed, they target you normally. When they fail, they target the double and destroying it. So overall, the Instinctive Obfuscation just got made clear and actually got buffed, so it can now be used once per hour, which I think is pretty good. Now, Gnome is actually only missing one feat from the Advanced Player's Guide here, which is Empathic Please. So beyond that, most everything else is accounted for, so all the better. All right, no changes to Goblin. Everything that was in the Advanced Player's Guide even made it into Goblin, and of course, beyond the normal changes of Goblin lore, got the buff that other Ancestries did, and their weapon feats got combined together as well. So yeah, other than that, Goblin was pretty much untouched, and everything in both core and Advanced Player's Guide made it into this book. On to Halfling, also relatively unchanged. They did get one change to one of their feats, beyond the ones I've mentioned before for all the Ancestries. Watchful Halfling now no longer gives you a circumstance penalty when trying to detect a creature that is currently being mind controlled of some variety or form. Now you just get the +2 circumstance bonus to perception checks when using the sense motive action against an enchanted or possessed character. And if you're not actively using it, you just don't get the bonus, but you don't get a penalty either. So overall, one of the trends in the remaster is they're just making feats that gave you benefits no longer give you downsides in return, which overall I think is for the best. On to Human, also relatively unchanged. They also got a slight tweak on one of their abilities. Now, the feat's Cooperative Soul no longer has a prerequisite for cooperative nature. I don't know if this is a buff or not. It really seems kind of a non-issue. If you're going down the aid line, you're going to pick up both feats anyway. But I guess now you don't need to have a feat tax to pick up this one feat, which honestly, Cooperative Soul is pretty good in general. So I don't know. It's a change. That's why I'm mentioning it. Nothing major. All right, and if you didn't get the notice, Leshies are now both now going to be included in the core book, but also are considered a common ancestry. So Leshy being here is considered a general change, and Leshy didn't get many changes except for Seed Pod, which gained actually a 30-foot range increment rather than a 10-foot range increment. So a pretty decent buff to Seed Pod. And Speak with Kindred now gives an additional bonus when you're talking to a similar type of plant or fungus as your Leshy. For instance, now, if you're a fungal Leshy, you get a bonus to talking with mushrooms and the like. So Speak with Kindred just getting a straight buff by giving you a circumstance bonus to your diplomacy checks when you're talking to one of your own kind, which is kind of fun. Another new ancestry technically here to the core book is going to be Orc, even though a lot of their feats were kind of already in the book thanks to the half-orc heritage, which has now been removed and been changed to the Daruma, I believe. Drumar, there you go. The Drum or Dromar, Dromars. Anyway, the Dromar, which is the new version of half orc, which any ancestry with a half orc heritage. Anyway, some of their feats were already in the book, but they did get some changes. And they're also now considered a common ancestry along with the Leshy, which is pretty cool. Grave Orc, similar to the Death Warden dwarves, gained a buff since there's no longer necromancy spells. Now grave orcs get their benefit against void damage, and they get that +1 circumstance bonus to saving throws against any effects with the death or void trait, rather than just necromancy. So overall, grave orc getting a pretty decent buff, in my opinion, as necromancy spells weren't the most common things, but death and void mostly would have had the same thing anyway. So it's at worst neutral, but probably a buff overall. Now, a very strange change here is the Orc War Mask got changed to Hold Mark, but Hold Mark was a level 5 feat and it did something slightly differently. So now this new version of Hold Mark that you can see over here does pretty much the same thing that the Orc War Mask did, except now you don't need to apply the face paint, and you get a bonus to the listed skill. In addition, you didn't need to spend anything else. Oh, you got trained in the skill, and a bonus. Sorry, you didn't get a +1 to the listed skill. You got trained in the listed skill, and now that bonus applies to spells of the same tradition. This one's just an overall rework, and now there's no mask feats. Now, I'm pretty sure I understand the reason why, but I'm not going to make any comment on it. The thing that is different though is Hold Mark, and what Hold Mark used to do was you essentially got critical specialization for types of weapons based on what kind of mark you had. That just isn't in here, and I would be surprised to see it in Player Core 2, considering that they're using the name Hold Mark here for War Mask. And I will mention as well, none of the other War Mask related feats did show up here. So I don't know. This is a very confusing one, a very interesting one. A complete reworking in this one particular section, which feels very, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I have my theories, but I'm not going to talk on it just for the sake of the video, honestly. But yeah, so that's a very big change, I would say. Orcs are also missing a few feats as well that they had in the Advanced Player's Guide or the core book. I actually think there were some core book ones here. They're now missing Victorious Vigor, which I do believe was in core book. Death's Drums, which was, I believe, in the Advanced Player's Guide, and Mask of Pain, which I think was also in the Advanced Player's Guide. So, that being the case, we might see these come back in the Player Core 2. Probably. Again, who knows? I don't even think Paizo knows at this point what's happening with some of these things. I'm only making a mention of it because if they don't show up, they're going to be out of print, and you can only find the information on these on web apps or Archive and Nethys. All right, now we're going to be moving on to the heritage changes, the versatile heritage. The only thing I'll mention with the changeling, which did get a few changes, but the changes were only in names. Now we no longer have green hags, we have sweet hags, I believe. And now we no longer have nightmare hags, we have the cuckoo hag. Other than that, they stayed relatively the same. Very interesting. But the main reason why I've swapped here to the core or to the book, which I normally wouldn't do, they didn't want us kind of flipping through the actual book. I'm just going to clip all the feats here anyway, so there's no point. So you guys are going to get a couple pages here from the book, but it's only going to be of the Nephilim stuff. So Nephilim, new versatile heritage, because it is now a combination of all of the alignment-based heritages. So the Gonzi, the Asamar, the Tiefling, the Aphrodite, and I'm sure there's like one other one I'm missing here, got all combined into one general ancestry, as there's no longer, or heritage, sorry, as there's no longer alignments essentially in the system. Though the planes still exist and the creatures there still have, the law bringers of the plane of what would have been the plane of law are still creatures of law. It's just it's no longer like a specific force. I don't know. It's a very weird thing when you're talking about the planar stuff, as they're the things most affected in this way. But yeah, so they kind of combined it, and it's mostly just the combination of the ASMR and the Tiefling, but some of the Gonzi feats made it in here as well, and some of the other ones. So we're just kind of gonna scroll through these a little bit. You got most of the same lineages that the ASMR and the Tiefling had. So Angelkin is still here, Grimspawn, Hellspawn, Lawbringer, Muse Touched, and Pitborn. And beyond that, they all kind of did the same stuff that they did before. I'm honestly not going to go into I'm not going to look into four heritages again to look into this one. I'm just showing you guys what's here. So here are the lineages that you can find with the new Nephilim. Moving on, first level feats here, we have Bestial Manifestation. This is the one that would allow you to, get hooves, whatever, to fit your style of Nephilim. So a pretty good one. Gives you some form of unarmed attack that's in the brawling group. And it has traits and die type based on what you can see here. Overall, a pretty good one. And it is strange because it says you can only select this feat only at first level. But other hand, like the changeling, for instance, the head claws, actually you could do later, and you can't retrain out of this. So I don't know. It's very interesting, and because of lineages, if you have a lineage or you want a lineage, you can't also select this feat. So I think that's a problem. I think Bestial Manifestation should be selectable later, but can't be retrained out of. I don't know. Halo does mostly the same thing it did before, so nothing there. Nephilim's Eyes was the amalgamated. It now you have dark vision feat, so there you go. Nephilim lore, getting the lore buff that many other ancestries did. And now you gain either diplomacy or intimidation and religion, which makes a lot of sense. So, pretty good overall for a lore feat. And it fits no matter your style because it does both diplomacy or intimidation. Not both, but does diplomacy or intimidation. Nimble Hooves, I don't know why they called it Nimble Hooves if the very first thing they're going to say is you possess hooves or something else. I don't know. But this gives you a +5 to your speed. Pretty simple. It's not accumulative with other things other than the one general feat that does it. But yeah, so Nimble Hooves is pretty good as a feat in general. Blessed Blood, which I think was already an ASMR feat, so I'm not going to get too much into this one. We have Extraplanar Supplication, which allows you to select either Bless or Bane that you can cast once per day as a first rank divine innate spell. Pretty cool. Honestly, I really like this one. Nephilim Resistance. This one's a very interesting one because you gain 5 resistance to either acid, cold, electricity, fire, or sonic. Now, this is a very interesting one because the Gonzi had particularly a type of resistance that changed every day, which I thought was very interesting. And now that that's gone, I don't know. I mean, of course, like anything with the remaster, if you like the older content, just play the older content. Nothing's stopping you. I probably would allow most of the older, like, versatile heritages, especially in this line of types, I guess, just good, and then the Nephilim can be some like outer some not directly from a plane kind of thing. I don't know. All I'm saying is like some of these are really good, but some of these also miss the point that some of the prior or versatile heritages have. So that being the case, honestly, if you like some of the older versatile heritages, just keep them and use them. Nothing in the game really changes all too much, but this is a really good workaround for anything that wasn't directly from a plane. So I still think the Nephilim is really good. Sound of Many Planes does answer a little bit of the Bisho manifestation problem I had earlier, because now you can select a lineage that you didn't already have, or you can have multiple. Really cool. So this feat is really cool. And as well, we got Skillful Tail for all of those people who really love Skillful Tail. There's a lot of you out there, and now it's included here in the Nephilim. So that feat has not gone anywhere. All right, so moving on, we have Celestial Magic here. This is more or less a combination of, I don't think all the different types of Nephilim type ancestries or heritages. I keep saying ancestries. Oh my goodness, I can't stop. Had some spells you could get. So now you get this version here, which I'm having a hard time reading out on my other monitor. You can choose 2 of the following spells: Clear Mind, Everlight, Humanoid Form, Revealing Light, Share Life, or Sure Footing. You can use each of the chosen spells once per day as a second rank divine innate spell. So this is really good. This is mostly on the good side of things. Obviously, it sees here that you require a prerequisite of a lineage from typically the good side, or what was the good side before. So this one makes a lot of sense and works out pretty well overall. Divine countermeasures, I don't know if we had anything like this before, but essentially all that it does is it gives you a +1 circumstance bonus to all saving throws against divine effects. More or less, you use your own knowledge on your heritage and your own blood to make it harder for divine things to affect you. So not a bad one. Not a super impactful one, I would say, but pretty good. Divine Wings, I mean, I believe most of them did have some kind of wing feat, so we have it right here. And Fiendish Magic is the opposite of the Celestial Magic that we saw before, so this is the evil side. Does all the same stuff. Celestial Mercy here, I believe, is already something we had from ASMR, so I'm not going to get too far into it. And Slip Sideways, I think, was also a type of feats that the Tieflings had before. So it is here now as well. I do love Summon Nephilim Kin. This is a really cool one. You get Summon Celestial, Summon Fiend, or another 5th rank spell capable of summoning an extraplanar creature appropriate to your lineage type. I think this is a really solid one, and it works for pretty much any type of lineage that you want to go for. So overall, Summon Nephilimkin is really cool. Just get a free summon once per day. Pretty awesome. And at level 17, we got the Infinite Flight, which is pretty cool with Eternal Wings, and Divine Declaration, where once per day you can cast Divine Decree as a 7th rank innate spell. I'm not sure if ASMR again, right? I know this is messy. I'm trying, 1, not to make this video an hour long, and 2, this is a new ancestry altogether. So that being the case, this is what we got. All right, like I'm trying my best to explain these in a way you can pause, you can read the video here for all those who are interested. I would have been pasting them anyway, but this is good. Does it fix all the problems with removing the prior versions of the versatile heritages? No. But for the new way they want to take it and the way they want to separate themselves from D&D, I understand where they're coming from. I do like the Nephilim, and I think the Nephilim plugged a few holes that were kind of left over from before. But in my opinion, and probably for my games as well, I'll just use the old versions of the versatile heritages anyway, with Nephilim in addition to be for something maybe not directly tied to the specific planes that characters could come to. I think this has a lot of interesting features, and while there's definitely a lot of overlap with something like Ismar or Tiefling, for the Aphrodite or the Ganzi specifically, and there's one other one again I keep forgetting, then this one I think works really well, like with those in a sense, or like maneuvering around those as an idea. Not obviously not combining 2 versatile heritages, but instead, like if you wanted to play a Ganzi, a chaos orientated being, but maybe you didn't want to necessarily have the same features as a normal Gonzi did. The Nephilim might fill it out. Or, honestly, it's just being extra planar in some way, I think works with this one as well. I don't know. It's really messy as most stuff with the remaster is, but I do like the Nephilim, and I do think it works very well, especially if we're combining at the very least Tiefling and ASMR. All right, now we're going to talk about the new mixed ancestry. So mixed ancestry has the Ayuverin. I don't know how to pronounce it. Ayuverin. Here's the word. Here's a description slightly of the first paragraph. Ayuverin, which are the half elves essentially, and we have the Dromar, which are the half orcs. They have their specific feats here. We have Inspire, Imitation, and Supernatural Charm effects from the half elf. Earn Glory, Alphatism. I think these are all the same. And as well for the Dromar, we have here the Monstrous Peacemaker and Orc Sight. So these work out overall. It's nothing new, so I'm not super worried about that. What I am very interested in is the new version of custom mixed heritage. So before, a mixed heritage was something that they alluded to, like in the game. They say, well, a half elf could be like a dwarf or an orc or whatever. Then, you just, all you do is just combine it. It was very loose and it wasn't very direct. And in the end, what ended up happening was whenever someone wanted to do a mixed heritage kind of thing, it was something homebrewed in, or people just didn't really opt for it because it didn't really feel like an option intended by the system. Now, with the rule here for custom mixed heritage, we have you just mix any two ancestries. This is an uncommon heritage, and the only thing you gain besides the traits in addition is low light vision if your current ancestry doesn't already have it, and the one you're mixing in has either low light or dark vision. So overall, the custom mixed heritage is a really cool rule, something that I'm very excited to see more people utilize. Hopefully this section encourages people to, because before, again, it was something that you could do. They had a little kind of a little sidebar that mentioned it in the core book originally, but it didn't feel like it was really the intent of the system. And so a lot of people just didn't do it. I feel like with this section kind of put in here, this is something that will hopefully motivate people to do more interesting things. And as well, I mean, there's not any limit. Technically, you could mix, like it says here, a custom mix ancestry heritage is an uncommon heritage. Choose an ancestry to tie the heritage. You gain traits of the ancestry and the new trait of your combined ancestry. And you also gain a low light vision with if the ancestry tied to the heritage has low light or dark vision. The heritage lets you select ancestry feats for the chosen ancestry in addition from those from your base. And the Alvaran and the Dromar heritage both have special feats, but custom heritage will need you to work with your GM to create or adapt some. So more or less, like you could play like an orc Leshy, a Leshen, some kind of interesting creature. I think there's a lot of really fun things here. I really hope people start mixing the ancestries because I think it'll make for some very interesting characters. But I feel like this might also be somewhat divisive. And this is the last feat. This is the last video I'm gonna be doing on the remaster. It's a long video. Is one that took a lot of time and effort to look through all the feats, and it obviously got a little messy at the end, mostly because if I did it, I think more properly, the video would have taken well over an hour, and it's already well longer than it should be. And there wasn't really that many changes anyway, so I don't want this video to drag more than necessary. The remaster is messy, and there's a lot of things that bring a lot of questions. There's a lot of things that people I know are very concerned about. Just know Paizo is aware. They're already releasing errata that affects other books. I've talked about that in some of my prior videos. And in addition, we're still only halfway through the remaster. The second half comes out in July. So that being the case, end of July, early August, sometime in that range. So if you are concerned, just play how the game already was working. You can find all prior rules on Archive and Nethys, and I don't think the books are going to go completely out of print yet. The old core book and advanced player's guide, until both these books are out. Maybe someone knows that specific. I may have missed a mention somewhere. There's so much like disparate information coming out of Paizo from blogs or live streams or whatever that it can be a little hard to keep everything together, which is obvious if you've seen any of my prior remaster videos. I am very confident that they have the players' interests in mind and they're going to do what's best for the player base. But in this intermediate time when we're trying to get stuff out, it is just going to be a mess. So that being the case, this is the list of changes. This is all the remaster stuff I plan on doing. And now hopefully Archive of Nethys will get the information out soon so that everyone can get access to all the goodness we had here with the remaster. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye.